Hello, Logan and Nathan. Drunken Film School. So what are we going to talk about? Are we going to talk about the 80s? Not really. Uh, Everybody has their opinion. Though you did not look back in nostalgia because you're not old enough to look back in nostalgia. I'm old enough to look back on nostalgia for the 80s. 80s was a different time. It was a political time when things had just gotten out of a very dark period. And blockbusters were not created in the 80s. They were not created for the 80s. Blockbusters started in the 70s. The 80s just perfected the blockbuster. But I'm not here to talk to you guys today about the 80s, which you kind of assumed, I think. I'm here to talk to you about the biggest mistake you made in your video. And it's not an opinion mistake. You rated the 60s low. You said the 60s was a regurgitation. You shouldn't have drank so much in that video. Just saying. Guys are awesome, but still. When I Google the 60s, just for fun, let's do that. And let's just see what comes up first. Let's go for, Nathan mentioned, aside from movies like 2001, stuff like that, which was great. I love 2001, but 60s was more of a regurgitation, which really isn't true. You guys recently did a video on spaghetti westerns. Spaghetti westerns were created in the 60s. They were mastered in the 60s. I'm not sure if you did one on Hammer Horror, but you really should. That's a genre that recreated, redefined horror and brought back gothic horror to cinema. It would be the precursor of many other companies and many other great productions. Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Terence Fisher directing, Freddie Francis, just some amazing, amazing people, some amazing work. And that was done, perfected during the 60s. Some great movies that came out in the 60s that you guys failed. Well, I'm doing a contest right now with one of those movies as the prize. Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. An incredible achievement in French New Wave cinema. Michelangelo Antonio's Blow Up. A fantastic film. Psycho came out in 1960. Dr. Strangelove, one of my favorites, came out in 1964. Lawrence of Arabia. Easy Rider is 69. So that grungy 70s feel that you talk about in some of your 70s videos are actually 1960s movies, not 1970s movies. There's the old classics like Dr. Zhivago, the start of the James Bond series, and the perfection of the James Bond series. Dr. No was the start, but Goldfinger perfected the formula that James Bond would use. And From Russia with Love would be the political James Bond film until Skyfall came out. There would not be another one that will be that influentially well done and great. La Dolce Vita came out in 1960. We had The Graduate in 1967. We have some classic films. Stuff that, in my favorite science fiction film of all time, Planet of the Apes, was a 1968 film. The 60s didn't regurgitate. The 60s invented. It rejuvenated. It remade. I'm going through this stuff here that I think is really important for you guys to check on. If you guys, maybe you guys aren't into more of the Criterion stuff. Criterion is big on French New Wave cinema. If you look at a lot of their stuff, you're going to see a lot of Godard. You're going to see a lot of the Jean-Pierre Melville. Some of the greats. There's different sides to the French cinema, but there's just so many amazing ones that happened around this time. And you got Truffaut, you got Claude Chabrol, who was pretty much the French Hitchcock, and just so many great directors that came out around this time, so many great films. And when you look at some of these guys and the stuff that they did, and then you discounted the 60s. You really can't. You can't discount the 60s for stuff like this. I have to check something here, because I've got a feeling. Let's check it out. Yeah, okay. So many of the greats came out around that time. And let's get off that. Okay, reevaluate the 60s. Look at your list and do that. And now let's talk about the 80s for a couple seconds, which I grew up in. So we're going to just, I don't know, cinema in the 80s. Let's do it. Because, you guys think blockbusters are fun, but there were some great influential movies that came out in the 80s. And sure, they had a lot of great blockbusters, but you know what? So did the 70s. Jaws came out. Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. Those were blockbuster movies. Star Wars was an event movie. Superman, the motion picture, in 1978, was an event film. You believe a man can fly? Well, you know what? They did. And it's just that Superman 2 and some of the blockbusters that came out in the 80s just managed to do it just a little bit better. It wasn't that the movies were just frivolous or fun. It's just that as a guy that would, at one point, would love to be a filmmaker and still would love to do filmmaking, I study every aspect of the film. Stuff, you've got to look at the films from every angle, from the writing to the lighting to, when you're studying film, to everything. The way I see it is that the way my eyes look at a movie when I'm watching it is there's a screen, it's kind of a flat screen, and then it becomes a pop-up book. When I can see where the marks go, I can see where the lighting goes. I'm weird that way. I actually had a conversation with that today. But movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, classics like E.T., Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back, arguably the greatest Star Wars film ever made. Film noir, fantasy film, fantastic futuristic film noir like Blade Runner. Movies like The Shining, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. As much as you want to talk about like all the remakes and stuff and all the sequels that came on later, the original Nightmare on Elm Street was a pretty damn groundbreaking film at its time. Stuff like even Return of the Jedi. I'm not the greatest. That's the one I like least out of the three, but a lot of people love Return of the Jedi, and Return of the Jedi did exactly what it needed to do. And both of them were better than Star Wars. I'm sorry, but they really kind of, when you look at it from an actual, like a technical, like a filmmaking point of view, Star Wars is a great starting point. But you need that starting point to get to the places that you want to go. Empire Strikes Back, not directed by Lucas, by the way, is the best of the films. And Return of the Jedi, originally called Revenge of the Jedi, is the natural conclusion. It's where it has to go. Movies like, movies that some people have forgotten, movies like The Lost Boys and stuff like that, crappy sequels, but, some amazingly great stuff came out of it. We got movies like, no, don't want to mention that one, that was not the greatest. There's some crappy movies in the 80s. Movies that I'm embarrassed that came about. But there's great stuff like Raging Bull. They're not all funny movies. Let's go to IMDb. Because movies like Stand By Me wasn't a blockbuster. It was a character study. It was a character piece. It was a King one that was about a time, a period in your life when you're on the cusp of going from that child to loss of innocence. That's what it's about. Scarface, one of the most influential movies of all time. For a thing. And go watch Cribs. Every episode of Cribs, dude. You got a basketball player on Cribs, you got an actor on Cribs. Somewhere Scarface is in there for some reason. Everybody has that movie. Not sure if you're a fan, but I love Full Metal Jacket. It's a Kubrick film. Karate Kid. In its day, Dirty Dancing, as silly as that may seem right now, was such a difference in its day. People stopped dancing in the late 70s. Disco was dead, and dancing was a bad thing. And it came back big with stuff like Footloose and Flashdance. People danced again. People were okay with dancing again. People were okay with listening to music. They were okay with having fun. And people look back now and you think, it's bad to have movies that are fun, that are interesting. And you know what? You need it. Between the Elephant Mans and the Empires of the Suns and The Thing and platoons that are made in the 80s, you need that fun. You need that frivolous kind of Yes, and you know what? That's not a bad generation. That is a balanced generation. And that is one thing the 70s was not a balanced generation. Thanks for watching, and for me right now, it's time for tea. Enjoyed your video, and be up on here later because I'm going to be doing a video with my dad. I'm going to be doing kind of an overview of some of his collection. He's got some really cool stuff. So, talk to you later, guys, and for me right now, it is really time for tea.